pleased to start a panel on future-ready skills for human-AI interaction. My name is Dragan Gašević. I'm a professor at Monash University in Australia, and I'm going to be moderating today's panel. So many of us are aware and interactive with the fact that artificial intelligence offers many promises to transform society with, in some cases, we are seeing reports about significant gains in productivity, in whether we are talking about software engineering or whether we are talking in certain problem-solving industries. Some predictions are also indicating that we may have up to even 50% of our different types of tasks exposed to the use of AI, meaning that different types of jobs will require knowledge of AI or will be at risk of automation. So there are also certain predictions that the half-life of knowledge and skills is shrinking, and there is potentially a reason for many contemporary workers to wonder the extent to which they will be required to upskill or reskill in the future and to jump from one context to another context. But then also, we are not even sure what skills and knowledge we need to develop. Some are really kind of putting a lot of investment into the artificial intelligence literacy, many different frameworks, more than 50 different instruments developed to measure these frameworks. Others are saying, well, maybe we are just jumping the guns, and if you are now not investing so much, maybe it's not a problem. Justin Reich in the conversation just had a piece in which he was talking about some of the lessons learned from the search engines and how some people 20 years ago were doing certain ways how search should be done. And today, many of these early lessons were completely useless. So in a way, how it's done. But on the other hand, generative AI as a technology is pretty incomplete. So it has some unreliabilities, it can hallucinate. So many things are not also necessarily improving with the bigger and larger models that are trained even in bigger and larger amounts of data. And the problem, on the other hand, is that generative AI articulates content that is very authoritative, that basically sounds really good, and that can potentially disarm us as the users of such content. In some cases, we term the phenomena as metacognitive laziness because some learners and users of these technologies accept things at the face value and don't accept it as such. So then it becomes the question if we are starting to over-rely on some of these technologies, whether we will see the skill atrophy and the extent to which skill atrophy is a problem at all that you should be worrying at this time. And then recent research even shows that integration of human skills and AI capabilities is not that easy. There was this meta-analysis published in Nature Human Behavior late last year that shows that in only certain limited situations of co-creative tasks that synergy happens. In majority of other cases, that it's not really so happening. So then many people are really confused. Many of us are hosting open days in our universities, and parents are asking, oh, should I send my child to study this particular degree because, computer science will be obsolete. Who needs that, right? So some institutions say, hey, let's do like heavy investment to AI literacy. Let's do many of these type of things. So recent also trends are indicating that many companies are saying we are not hiring for the entry-level positions. The question is how we are going to get mid-career employees and who's going to develop their skills if they're all mid-career employed. So obviously AI brings these immense possibilities, but also lots of challenges. So then for us, really the big question is even does it make sense to speak of future-ready skills for human-AI interaction? And if it's so, what should those skills be and how they can be developed responsibly? So to answer these big questions, I have an amazing group of people who will be participating in today's panel. So I have Professor Sanna Järvelä, who is a professor of learning and educational technology and the head of learning and education technology research lab at the University of Oulu in Finland, and she leads there a big a hybrid intelligence research program supported by the Research Council of Finland. Nancy Lowe is a chair professor of learning sciences and technology and the founding director of the Center for Information Technology in Education and associate dean of strategic development in the Faculty of Education at the University of Hong Kong. Inge Molenaar is professor of education and artificial intelligence in the Behavioral Science Institute at Radboud University and the director of the National AI and Education Lab in the Netherlands. And Jason Lodge is professor of educational psychology and the director of the Learning, Instruction and Technology Lab in the School of Education at the University of Queensland in Australia. So we'll try to explore some of these questions and to see the extent to which we can really try to also energize the conversations with the audience. So I'd like to start with Sanna Järvelä, who's done really some pioneering work in the ways how people help each other better learn, and also they help each other to regulate their own learning. And she's been also working on the ways that people can also team up in similar ways with AI or not. So Sanna, can you tell us how learners are prepared to learn individually and in groups? And what are the key lessons we can learn from that space that can inform our thinking about future-ready skills for human-AI interaction?
Thank you, Dragan, and thank you for being able to be part of this very interesting and timely discussion. Let me start with the very basics and put it very simply. We know for decades that active learners have active minds, because then people ask questions, argue, create new knowledge, compare, and all of these things which have a very high impact on learning and developing new knowledge. In other words, learners' agency matters. But this agency or activeness is not enough, of course, but we know that what makes successful learners is their ability to self-regulate their learning processes, actually those active minds. So what matters is the superpower what we human have. It is called metacognition, of course. Our human ability to think about our thinking and the kind of experiment with our own thoughts, feelings, understanding, and so on. So while we work now in a lot of with machines, I would call that metacognition is a human engine that helps us to monitor and control our learning, and also regulate, which is revise, change, and adapt purposefully when needed. And I think this is absolutely something important we truly need to treasure in human AI interaction. And this is something we quite a lot have been made progress in recent research. For example, we have been doing a lot in our cellar with Inge and Dragan and our labs on that area. But when we are talking about collaborative learning, which is really, really important still, I really believe on power of collaborative learning. That's why we are here discussing together. Things get even more complex. Because in these collaborative interactions, learners face more challenges and obstacles in managing and regulating those rich interactions with other people and all these contextual issues intervening. And we have learned that effective learning in groups is not just managing these tasks in an efficient way, but it is regulating group members' thinking together. And we already know in our research that it is actually this shared monitoring, which is really critical for groups to adapt and change and regulate. So now I come to the key question, which I think we didn't yet solved, and we need to contribute in this human AI area, is that how do we keep balance between human group power and AI power? And I still might at that, what we are currently trying to do there is that we are exploring that what if AI would recognize those challenges in collaborative learning interactions, context, and so on, what we call triggers for regulation. And if AI can identify those moments, then we can maintain the agency, where I started my point, in group learners, and they can share and respond together, and then perhaps developing a stronger collaboration with AI. Perhaps this was my summary about what is important.
So absolutely good. No, I think that really kind of explains I like our superpower, that is metacognition, while AI is still not having it, and the way how we are exercising, except AI is making us lazy with that potentially. Inge, you also did a lot of work in this whole space, and you even proposed a model that you called, using the fancy word, hybrid human AI regulation. So can you tell us a little bit more about it and why it is important for our thinking about future-ready skills for human AI interaction?
Thanks, Dragan, and thanks, Sanna. And we'll continue more on the superpower of metacognition. And human AI regulation is really about who is actually regulating. Is it the human or is it the artificial intelligence? And as you know, we've been using AI in education already for a long time. So over the last decade, students have been working in adaptive learning technologies and in intelligent tutoring systems. And what we generally see there is a lot of focus on helping students to gain the knowledge and skills that we have in mind in the instructional design. And we do that by optimizing the learning material for the students. And this is really nice because students actually get a more efficient way of gaining the knowledge and skills that are at stake. But at the same time, we're also taking off some of the regulation. So students are not responsible generally in these environments about their planning and their monitoring and the control over their own learning processes, or at least it's reduced in most cases. That's efficient for learning at large, but it's not necessarily efficient for creating the skills that you need to regulate yourself and also to regulate maybe an AI if you're working with an AI to learn. So in that space, we created the hybrid human AI regulation idea where we said, okay, instead of just helping students to gain the knowledge, we're also helping students to gain the metacognitive skills and the regulation skills needed to actually regulate their own learning. And we can do that in much the same way as we do it with the cognitive level, namely by scaffolding students at the level that they need and slowly increasing their autonomy over these important regulation skills. And in that way, it also boosts again the cognitive learning because regulation is really essential for integrating new knowledge in existing knowledge structures. So it's not just because we want them to teach and learn these regulation skills, it's also very important for their own learning processes. Now, if you look at generative AI tools, which of course is the whole new generation of AI used, they're general purpose, they're not designed for education, and that makes it a largely different context than the educational tools that we had before. And in these situations, students are also offloading their cognitive activities. So not just the regulation is being offloaded, but also the actual learning. They just copy paste the output of the model in. And students are aware that they're doing this. They voice it. They say, okay, yes, I know I'm not learning, but hey, I need an efficiency. I need a quick fix here. I'm just going to do this and then I'm done. Or I know it's not effective, but I don't really know how to make it effective because the output is so perfect. I cannot add anything. I feel completely lost in adding my existing knowledge to the knowledge that is already reflected in the output of the generative AI. So it's very hard for students to regulate in that space, even if they want to. And I think the big challenge ahead of us is trying to teach students how to deal with this output, how to regulate their learning processes for themselves, but also in this interaction with AI tools, and really become skilled to learn in this new space. And I think that's what we're working on with this framework as well. That's really trying to help students gain these new skills in regulation through working with the AI.
Okay, beautiful. All right, so it seems very clear common thread is that we need to practice our agency, our metacognition. Good. But we also have these digital competencies. And I know Nancy did a lot of influential work on the development of the digital competencies, also lots of assessment frameworks as well, really robust work that has gained lots of attention across many agencies, but more importantly, also is used heavily. So Nancy, is AI literacy now a completely different thing?
Well,
And then also, has your thinking changed about digital competencies given the growing importance of human-AI interaction?
Right. Okay. That's a very good question. We have all these new literacies, new terms coming up. And of course, each term has also a lot of different frameworks and so on. And maybe I would like to sort of start with something that I wrote with Hans Wilhelm Pelgrim in 2003 for UNESCO. There's a book called ICT in Education Around the World, Trends, Problems, and Prospects. And in that book, we were talking about reviewing what's the role of ICT, well, a very old term now, in education. And we basically categorize them into learning about, so about the ICT itself, learning with, so it becomes a tool, or learning through ICT. That means doing learning something which would not have been possible without the ICT. Say, for example, learning to operate a nuclear reactor or whatever, which would not have been possible. You try to fly an aeroplane. So now, if we think about what we are, and then what do we mean? But as time moves on, it's quite clear that just learning about is not very useful, because what you're trying to learn about is changing more and more faster. So it's faster and faster. And then learning with. So in fact, before I mean the AI becomes so prevalent, there is quite a lot of work on digital literacy or digital competence. The framework that I like most about in that area is the work that's been done by the European Commission, where their idea was, so what is digital competence? Is in trying to understand what is the competence that's required when humans interact with digital systems. So there's just saying, okay, so there were 5 competence areas: information and data literacy, communication and collaboration, digital content creation, digital safety, and problem solving. Okay, so as time moves on, they added a little bit more. So computational thinking. So computational thinking is not something totally new, because it's still humans interacting with digital systems. And they sort of analyze the scenarios of where computational thinking is supposed to be important. And then basically they found that it's in 2 areas: digital content creation and problem solving in digital systems. Now come the AI. Now they had in 2022, before, I mean the summer 2022, they had the STICCOM 2.2, where they actually integrated AI into that framework. And so they collected, I think, over 100 scenarios of humans interacting with AI systems from across Europe and maybe a bit more further beyond too. And then they found that the OECD has released a kind of like a consultation framework on AI literacy, which, of course, I mean, there's a lot of overlap in different frameworks, but I like the OECD one in that they emphasize on the defining the authentic scenarios within which the digital, the AI literacy is to be sort of framed. So they basically talk about 4 kinds of scenarios: engaging with, and then creating, and then designing, and then one more. Let's see. So engaging with, creating with, managing, and designing AI. And so I think in all, I'm thinking, yes, AI literacy, and my take on it is that we can't actually just talk about AI literacy without the experience of using digital systems. So AI systems is part of that digital system. And so how do we, when we talk about future skills, then I would say the ability to be working with these systems are important. But how do we foster? I mean, fostering them and also assessing them becomes important.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Nancy. And it's really good that you actually are broadening that horizon. I'm going to turn over now to Jason, who's been pretty leading voice in many public and policy discussions around the development of future-ready skills for the age of AI. And you, Jason, wrote a very nice piece recently where you explained why AI literacy will go the way of the floppy disk, for those who remember the floppy disks. Can you tell us more about that and what we should focus on in our thinking on future-ready skills for human-AI interaction?
Thanks, Dragan. That was a very kind way of saying that I rant a lot. I appreciate it. So there's a couple of things going on here. One, I'm not entirely convinced by the kind of multi-literacies idea. And look, whether you call it a literacy or a competency or whatever it might be, I think that matters because sometimes that ends up papering over what are the kind of fundamental skills that sit underneath that. And I'm seeing a lot of education sectors and institutions saying, yeah, we've done something about AI. We've got AI literacy, or we're doing an AI literacy course. Okay, but what does that actually mean? So it's sort of becoming a term that is something that people can sell more than anything else, and that's part of the reason that I think it's pretty problematic. The other thing is, I think if you sort of cast your mind back, let's say that we're in March 2022 right now, and I say to you, look, I've got this fabulous thing for you. It's this course on AI literacy. Well, of course, we know a year later, most of what I would have told you then is going to be absolutely useless. So somehow we think that focusing on an AI literacy right now is something that is going to have some sort of persistence in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, or, I think of my job as trying to prepare my students for their whole career, the next 30 years. Is that the best use of our time to be preparing them to use a technology that we have no idea what it's going to look like even in a year, let alone beyond that? So I think this says something about why we keep repeating these cycles. When I was a kid, it was all about learning command code prompts, and then it was Windows 1, and then, many of you will remember that when the iPad came along, it was like, oh my God, everybody had to have a tablet. We all had to know how to use tablet computers. It was going to be the most amazing thing ever. And over and over and over again, these things have come through, and we've had to learn about the technology. I think what we were really learning is a lot of the things that we've heard, Inge and Sanna and Nancy's alluded to this as well. These are sort of more fundamental skills. What I was actually learning when I was going through all these things is I was learning how to learn in a technical domain. That's the bit that has stuck with me. I haven't used a command line prompt in 20, 25 years, but I use my learning how to learn in a technical domain every day. So why don't we focus on that? I think AI literacy becomes a bit of a distraction from the adaptive skills that really matter. Maybe we don't have all of those pinned down. Maybe we don't know which of those are transferable. Maybe we don't know which of those have to be deeply embedded within a domain. But I think that's the work we need to do to figure it out. Packaging something up and saying, oh, this is all about AI literacy and saying, here, the job's done, doesn't seem to be right to me. As part of that, I think what we're starting to see in the data that we're collecting is that the students who are really good at using AI in their learning are not so because they understand the AI. They are so because they understand themselves. So what I'm saying here is that good learners with AI were good learners first, right? probably not surprising again, given everything that we've heard in this panel. And it tells us that all of the things that we've known for a long time are still important here. And Nancy's alluded to this already. You know, we've heard about metacognition. It's also about an information issue here. It's about epistemology. What is knowledge? How does it work? We don't spend enough time, I think, in many education systems around the world focusing on those sorts of things. So it's no wonder that we then see students using AIs and going, yeah, of course I'm going to use glue to get cheese to stick to my pizza, right? It doesn't make any sense. So there is something here about a fundamental understanding of how knowledge works that I think is an important part of this equation as well, and we're not necessarily focusing on that enough. So to me, Andreas Schleicher from the OECD, I think, captured this really nicely. Our job in education is to create first-class citizens, not second-class robots. So when I think about all of this, I think about the human component in this, starting with that human component. Yes, at some point we need to bring in some exposure to the technologies and make sure that students understand what their limitations are and biases and problems and ethical implications and all the rest of it. But why aren't we starting with the human first? Like, what it means to be a human in this age is something that we desperately need to focus on. And we know that because we look at adolescents and rates of depression and anxiety are going through the roof. You know, the issues we're talking about in terms of metacognitive laziness and taking shortcuts, maybe that's because you know, we're not helping students to understand the work of learning and the value of engaging in that work. So to me, I think those kinds of adaptive human skills are probably the place to start, and not on something like AI literacy. That's probably the later step down the track.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jason. And you're making a really nice plug for my talk tomorrow about adaptive skills and everything we are going to talk. But I think that's really the gist of it. I think it's kind of providing the nice summary as well of the thread that we had from Sanna to Inge, Nancy, and then yourself. I'm going to ask one more question each of our panelists, and then I see also lots of discussions going on here on Zoom as well as Hua. So I'm going to first ask Sanna. So Sanna, you're leading this really interesting program of hybrid intelligence in your university, and you worked across different professional fields as part of that work. So what advice can you give to organizations and learners that can guide their thinking about preparation of future-ready skills for human-AI interaction?
Okay. Yes, first of all, in hybrid intelligence, and I think we all are working more or less in this area, that we focus on how humans and AI can learn, collaborate, or even think together, even though it is quite bold idea at the moment. But what is important is that the fundamental thinking behind is that we see intelligence as something shared, not just in machines, but in between people, and now between people and AI. So my thinking or advice at the moment is that if we can help learners to practice self-regulated learning skills early, both with peers and with AI partners, we will be preparing them not just to use AI, but to learn and grow with it. And I think this is the scenario we are looking currently. I still would like to add here, because we use these nice fancy terms like hybrid intelligence quite a lot, and we seem to have already some offers that this is hybrid intelligence and so on. I think we really need to work hard to create more spaces and hybrid intelligence systems, as we try to do in Oulu, where humans and AI can truly work together and not just AI to automate. We are very, very early in this area. I don't think that AI is ready yet. We need this strong multidisciplinary collaboration from algorithm side of research, from human side of research, to find solutions for these spaces where humans and AI can partner together. And as you pointed out in this is absolutely multi-professional, different kind of learning is everywhere. It's not only in education, even the education is start of learning everywhere. Currently, we are working for solutions especially in K-12 education, but also working in multi-professional teams in medical and nursing education as cases.
Nice. That's lots of different areas, and it's really interesting, Sanna, to see how you are tackling lots of adult learning, different workplaces, and everything else. And so that's something that many are trying to kind of say, hey, we need employees to know these things, but we are not really investing so much into the ways how we can actually equip better people in that age group. We'll go a little bit more into the earlier stages of education and ask Inge a little bit how things are done in that space. And Inge, you've been leading NOLI, which is probably the largest dedicated research-led lab in the world that is focused on AI in education. And you've been working with many schools there. So how early schools should integrate AI in their curriculum, and what advice would you give to schools and parents to guide the development of future-ready skills for human-AI interaction?
Thanks, Dragan. Important question, and I am going to foreground that I don't think we know the exact answer at this point in time of when and how students should and should not learn with AI. So I think it's really important to foreground that NOLI is mostly interested in looking at how AI can be used as a means to learn and to learn with. So in Nancy's Learn with AI category. And we develop innovative practices together with teachers, scientists, and companies to make sure that the voice of teachers are actually articulated and heard well, and then translated into ways that are actually connected into the way teachers want to work in classrooms with AI. And I think that's an important thing that we haven't seen enough around the world. And it boosts autonomy of teachers, both at the design phase, but also in thinking about how the AI can be refined or adjusted in their teaching phases and teaching cycles. And that's a skill that teachers still need to develop, and we're working with them on developing systems that can help them in that space. With regard to students, I think it's super important, especially with young students, to make a distinction between educational AI, which has been developed for teaching and learning, and generic AI, which are general purpose AI solutions also being used in classrooms. And I would be particularly careful of using those at scale with young students, because we really don't know enough about how these systems work. They're not well designed from an instructional perspective. They don't align or personalize to students' needs. There is contextual limitations. So there are lots and lots of limitations with generic AI tools being used in primary and secondary education. So in that sense, I would really be very careful still at this point in time, and really make sure that we engage teachers in the dialogue of how to use these tools for younger students, and also balance that with the limitations that students have with regards to their metacognitive skills, and the way to actually effectively regulate situations like this. And we've all seen the examples both in secondary schools, but also in high schools and colleges around the world. So there's lots of space to work on that together, and really make sure that we use it in a responsible manner when we bring it to classrooms, and at the same time, lots of opportunity to improve existing processes with AI, which can be amplified. And if you're interested in our co-creation projects, we have about 30 running in which we develop teacher innovations together with learners and teachers in primary, secondary schools. And you can see them at the website.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Inge. And I know lots of different initiatives are going on, and it's quite impressive to see so much interaction. I also know, Nancy, that you care a lot about teacher development, and you led so many different high impact initiatives in Hong Kong that made a mark much beyond Hong Kong itself. So what advice would you give to teachers that can inform their thinking about different teaching practices while preparing children to develop future-ready skills for human-AI interaction?
Right, thank you. First of all, I think what Sanna earlier said about the importance of learning, self-regulated learning, and actually developing the agency, in whatever we do on a day-to-day basis is extremely important, not only for children, not only for students, but for teachers. Recently, I had an experience. I was invited to a teacher professional development sort of day where they had several hundred teachers belonging to the same sort of school organization. And before my talk, there were 4 teachers who shared, how they use AI. And they were so excited, talking about how they can use the AI, what kind of tools they can use for generating lesson plans, slides, exercises, getting the AI to grade, to give feedback. And I was so shocked. So I was thinking, okay, so we as teachers are wanting to ensure that the students are not using AI to submit their work. But what are teachers doing? We can be falling prey to exactly the same situation. So I think, first of all, when we think about AI or future skills, first of all, the goals of education needs to change. If the goal of education is still learning set curricula, doing set things and so on, and using the same sort of traditional assessment, then what is to prevent teachers to do it the way that I was describing? Because the teachers would think, well, they are so slick, they are so quick, they are so whatever, and I won't have that same efficiency. So, but in fact, this would not be serving. I was just thinking, if that's the case, then there has been this debate about whether teachers would be replaced by AI. Well, if we're not changing the goals of education, this is where it would be going. Just like we now have Uber drivers, later we'll have self-driving cars. It's going the same way. So we need to ask, what is humanity? And also, I think it's important for us to consider, what is happening in. I think we in the, in the learning sciences, working as researchers on learning technology and so on, we need to be thinking beyond the classroom. We need to be thinking about the education system. We must. So how the policymakers understand what is AI, what is AI literacy, I think is extremely important, and it has to be a change. It's a social. To me, it's a social technical change. So changing the goals, the structure, the assessment, and also how schools organize themselves. It has to be an innovation. So the teacher professional development needs to be like what Inge said, is really co-creating the future of learning now.
Good. That's really, really interesting point. And Nancy, I really like the point you are making about what is humanity. Things are not necessarily staying static. Life is changing and the environment is continuously changing. And even we are seeing recent LLMs, large language models, and studies are showing that they can only simulate reasoning for as long as the type of tasks are really distributionally matching the types of data they were trained on. The moment you move on from some other types of tasks, AI is not quite good at reasoning, what is typically called. I also like that we get a little bit of a detour. We start from higher education, adult learners, then went to schools, and now going back to the higher education. I know, Jason, you again did a lot of work in policy and different types of discussions. And you also noted a really significant disconnect between research on learning and teaching and educational policy. And you also, recently I'm quoting you here, which led to the misconceptions that persist in higher level discussions. Like I'll just drop the bomb like digital natives or AI natives or learning styles and those type of things are heavily debunked in the literature. So can you tell us a little bit more about it and what should we do to have informed decisions about education policy on future-ready skills for human-AI interaction?
Thanks, Dragan. So the policy space is something that I've only been involved in for the last few years, and there's a few things that really strike me. One of them is this delay. So, there was a lot of work that was done in 2003, 2004 in the sort of Web 2.0 days. BJ Fogg and other people who wrote a great book called Persuasive Technology and was sort of pointing to some of the issues that they were starting to see emerge when they were starting to understand the mechanisms of how those interactions were playing out. And here we are 20 years later, and it's now only at this point that some governments are saying, maybe it's not a good idea to give 11-year-olds social media while they're at school. So there's such a huge lag between when people are doing the kind of mechanistic work that I know you do and that Sanna and Inge have talked about that they're doing as well, and when that actually gets reflected in ways in which policy gets changed over that longer period of time. The number that I've heard from several different sources now is that there's a 17-year lag before you see real change in policy and the kind of system change that Nancy was just talking about. We can't wait that long, right? Particularly for a technology that is as powerful as AI. So it does raise the question about what do we do from here? And I think Inge's talked a little bit about how we bring different stakeholders together. And I think that's got to happen now. We can't allow this lag to continue to happen because, as you've pointed out, Dragan, the hole that gets left gets filled with nonsense that actually doesn't make sense because policymakers get a lot of pressure to do something. The general public knows that there is something going on here with AI. Kids come home from school and say, all the other kids in my class are using AI to cheat on their assessment. Pressure starts to build on policymakers to do something. And if there's not really solid, rigorous evidence that's presented in front of them, they'll take the best solution that they have got at hand. And sometimes those things happen to be things like, oh, well, students are all digital natives or learning styles, as you mentioned. Now, what I think we probably should be aiming for is firstly to get stakeholders in the room together so that we can actually try and have that conversation. And it's hard to facilitate that because we're used to talking to our own audience and shifting from the kind of conversation that we might have as researchers, for example, to the sort of conversation that policymakers has requires some translation and some facilitation to make that work. The other thing that I think is important in that, though, is that often it sort of like becomes this case of, well, I need to convince you that what we're seeing in practice is the most important thing, or I need to convince you that the theories that we have that we're trying to understand this through is the most important thing. I think what's probably the most important thing of all is that those things line up. So learning styles is such a great example of this. We've seen some observations in classrooms that students have preferences. We've come up with this theory of learning styles, and it wasn't until the mechanisms were understood later down the track that we realized that something was going on. So to me, I think the real challenge in translating a lot of the sort of fundamental research that many of us are doing to making real change in practice is to look for consilience, which comes from biology, which is to say that the mechanisms, the theories, and the observations in the real world need to align in some way. And if they don't align, something's wrong with one of them. So I think that's the kind of thinking that is useful to start having in those sorts of conversations. Is what I'm seeing in the lab making any sense in terms of what might be happening in the real world? And if it's not, let's figure out why. And from there, I think we can start to break down that lag that we're seeing in the research to policy pipeline.
Yes. Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jason. That's really an important point that you are making there. And I think that's really the difficulty as well, that we have lots of informed decisions. All right, so I would like to take some of the questions that the audience discussed, and they already, I think, between each other answered or get to consensus, but there are also some really provocative, interesting ideas. So there's a question coming from Steve H., who indicates that agencies, self-regulation, metacognition, these must incorporate a wide range of activities and attributes for students with different levels of abilities. Therefore, these aspects of learning could be very difficult for AI to effectively and ethically navigate. So I was hoping that maybe, Sanna, you would have some thoughts in response to this.
Yes, I actually love this point, and I really hope so that AI is not able to model all these, because there we exactly keep the uniqueness of human core. The fact is that all of these issues, we don't have like this clear cognitive skills or strategies, and then some motivational beliefs, and then some affective emotions and so on, but they all merge. Because we human are so flexible in our thinking, we do contextualized decisions. Our regulatory processes are focused on real needs, on real problems, and they all are depending. They are not only cognitive acts, but they are always according to your beliefs and your motivational power, your efforts. So actually, my only aspect is I really hope that these are exactly those human strong, unique skills which can be framed in these self-regulated learning processes, which would work together with AI to make us stronger. I wouldn't give all of these to AI, and I hope that AI is not able to model all these as completely as we do together as humans.
That's the hope. So we also had a question from Juliana that talked about metacognition and whether AI has or doesn't have metacognition. I also saw that Alexander Matthias was also already providing some quick responses and everything else, but maybe a quick reaction from you, Jason, on that.
When I think about this, I think, and maybe this is just the way that I consider this, and I do take that with a grain of salt. I think to some degree metacognition implies consciousness, and I think it's not quite right to say that. I think that would be an extraordinary claim to say that AI has consciousness, and I think if you are going to make an extraordinary claim, that requires extraordinary evidence. And I'm not sure for me that we have seen the evidence to suggest that these things are conscious to the point where they can think about their own thinking, which, is the sort of basic definition that I work off of around metacognition. So I'm not convinced of that, maybe at some point in the future, but I think at this point, if we're assuming that thinking about thinking requires some level of self-awareness, that to me would heavily imply consciousness, and these things don't seem to be conscious. I'm open to be convinced otherwise, but it would have to be pretty convincing evidence to change my mind.
Yeah. No, thanks so much, Jason, for that quick summary of the things. And I would again refer back to the point I earlier made. There was this study published by Arizona State University in late August that basically showed that large language models can only simulate reasoning for as long as it fits the exact distributions of the data they were trained on. The moment you're getting outside of these distributions, the large language models do not reason. So that basically indicates the point and also provides the point you were making about the adaptivity, the human adaptivity ability to learn in a particular domain. We also have a question from Alexander, who indicated, touching on assessment, I'm not sure what constitutes competence when the boundaries between human and AI capabilities are increasingly blurred. Should we focus on uniquely human skills, complementary skills, or the meta skills of knowing when to leverage AI? Nancy, do you have any thoughts on this? I thought, given that you did all your work.
I would love to answer this question, actually. Yeah. Okay, now that AI is amongst us, so whatever we think in terms of competence, meaning how we actually handle and deal with different situations, it should be taken into account. And so I would say, importantly, we have to be, I was talking about teachers, if we are not careful, could be just using it. So thinking about the AI as a tool or learning from it. But if we take it the other way, so working together, both for the students and for the teachers, if they can be given situations where, students are going to be involved in solving problem, authentic context, and building partnership. So partnership among students working together, teachers working in partnership with the students, and also say, if we were to be working further, then of course the technology, the AI that we are using most of the time are in fact like early days of, say, ICT, so-called ICT in education. They are just whatever is out there and then given to people in education. So it's important for us in education, in research, to be able to co-design, co-develop. So when I was talking about the social technical co-evolution, then it's really the research and learning partnership that we built. And then and when we talk about assessment, it would also be actually a research exercise for us.
Yeah, no, that's really comprehensive answer and the nice idea. I see also another question from Alexander, but I want to give some other people chance to answer their questions before we go back to Alexander's question as well. And I'll ask also to be considered the rest of the time more like a lightning round, meaning to limit our responses to maybe 30 to 60 seconds. So Fabienne asked, fantastic to hear all the developmental initiatives at Radboud University. That seems to be exception rather than rule. How can we strengthen partnerships between educational researchers and edtech developers so that tools used in the classroom are evidence-informed and evaluated for impact? Inge, super easy question for you. 30 seconds. 60 seconds.
30 seconds. So very snuggle. We have two programs that we're running and developed a methodology for. One is co-creation. It's really about developing new in-class innovations at a small scale, really changing class practices. The other one is focusing on co-implementation, and it's more about doing sustainable innovation trajectories over time and seeing how that changes teachers' behavior and students' learning. Both are described in our magazine. I will post it in the chat, and happy to talk about it more, Fabienne, if you want to learn how we execute these programs at No Lie. How about that for 30 seconds, Dragan?
Well done. You see? Well done,
We
Professor
can do
Molenaar.
it.
Yeah, exactly. So the next question was from J.C. Bill, who basically wondered, aren't metacognitive abilities and abilities to learn developed during puberty and transition already in these kind of teen formative years? I thought Sanna may want to quickly touch on that point.
Excuse me, can I?
Yeah. So Jay was wondering, aren't these skills on metacognition developed long before college? And he was commenting that these are more of mental puberty transition already in early teen years.
I have good news. I have good news. We have more than 30, even 50 years evidence that you develop these skills from very early days until the old 80s. So you can always train. These skills are not fixed. They are something which evolve, and you can train them with teachers, yourself, with technologies, with AI, and so it's good news.
Absolutely. And the other news is also that most of people don't develop them so well in these ages, and we basically end up using weak learning strategies as well. We are highly inaccurate in judging how well we are progressing. So those are some of the key things. Thanks so much for that. Angus asked a really interesting question. I was wondering whether Jason could address it. If we accept that AI is becoming a partner in regulation, what should learning how to learn with AI look like?
Hi, Angus. Nice to virtually see you. I think it's sort of captured in my comments from before. I think we need to start with the human and think about what the human side of, I would say this because I've got a psych background, but I think it's nonetheless true. We don't know what the technology is going to look like in the future, but if we start with the human, I think that gives us the best foundation to be able to build those kinds of skills and interaction into the future. Full stop. And is that 30 seconds?
Well done. We are doing this lightning round. We are crushing it. Shemba asks, how can we identify these future ready skills as researchers? Any examples or suggested approaches? Nancy, did you have any thoughts? Because you did lots about digital competencies as well.
Yes. Well, I think still to me is really the partnership. We've seen a lot of very creative work from teachers. So if they are asked to really, and also we need to get them to be collaborating. So we work with teachers in collaborative projects, and then at the moment I'm just actually typing into the chat. Say a recent project that we just started.
Nice.
So working with teachers and schools, so not just the teachers, but also the school leaders on how they would like, so they would like to introduce AI into their STEAM curriculum. How can they do it? So we work together. And so it's a network across schools. And so each school make their own decisions, but then we create a lot of opportunities to share what they have done. Of course, we do give them, and one important support we give them is that we do co-design work with them. So they tell us their innovation ideas, and then we work with them to make it work. And also, I think a lot of times, also helping them to design assessment. So I think it's really a co-learning experience.
Interesting. Thanks so much, Nancy, for sharing that. I'm gonna give first priority to Fatima's question. In the era of AI, are students adopting tools faster than teachers, risking teachers' self-efficacy? How can we balance this with simple training or co-regulation tips? Inge, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because especially in secondary education, we see this happening really quickly right now. So students are already 10 steps ahead. I think having the dialogue in your classroom about what they're using, how they're using it, and remembering that as a teacher, you know much more about learning than your students do, and listening to them, how they use the AI, and then try to have a good dialogue about what that means for their learning and how they can do that in a better way is probably the best way to deal with this. And students appreciate it. They want help. They want to talk about these practices, and they would really like to see how they can do this better. So if you can open up that dialogue as opposed to making it a threat discussion, I think you're on the right track.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. I love our efficiency. So I think we can take one more question. Zainab's question. So thanks for this useful panel. At first, from your opinion, which role of students' agency as a learner is more important for getting skills? So the question is maybe a bit broad and not particularly precise. But I was hoping maybe either Sanna or Jason could give it a try. Sanna, do you want to try, or Jason?
I think the agency is always part of these skills, because I see agency even when you start thinking and planning, asking questions, arguing, there is always agency there to be active and participate. So agency is part of this actively being able to enact and monitor and being strategically regulating your learning. And so I wouldn't separate them. That's a bit difficult to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Jason,
No,
I'd like to hear your addition.
For me, it all kind of comes back and distills down to, can I make a good judgment about where I am in my learning, which Sanna, you've alluded to? Can I make a good decision about where to go next? And I think when students have got those decision-making capabilities and the skills to be able to move forward, I think that opens up all sorts of opportunities for them to have agency in their learning, and then you can kind of build from there. That's kind of the sense from the work that we've done anyway.
Beautiful. And that's that much we can answer today. I think today we managed to answer lots of your questions. I think it boiled down also to some of the fundamental questions of the technology itself and learning how to use technology is not sufficient. I think we need to go back to look into some of the foundational opportunities for us that makes us human, and that's basically our ability to metacognitively monitor and control what and how we are engaging into the interactions with AI, as much as we are also engaging in interaction with humans and other potential different types of actors. At the same time, our agency is really central in that space, and the judgments that we are making are heavily shaped in the ways how we are doing some of these things. So the future-ready skills really are central in terms of how we need to think about human abilities to engage effectively with AI. And on that very note, I hope that the rest of the conference as well will help us further clarify some of these things. I also would like to thank all our panelists for their really amazing responses, and also wonderful audience who was so engaging and so interactive all the time. So thanks so much. By this, the panel is over, and enjoy the rest of the conference.